we'll just go to the user, and user will be IRC, and then house on appreciate that. Appreciate it. How's it going, Tim?
Okay.
Yeah, turn that one down. That's a little thing. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And so the commission stuff is all brand new. She used to work at legislative services in 1970 and
Nobody ever
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. We are ready to begin our meeting this morning. We have one bill on the docket today. As soon as we have a quorum, we'll go to our bill, but in lieu of that, we're going to start with our budget amendments. First up, we have Delegate Gilbert.
Where do you want me, Mr. Chairman? Okay. Mr. Chairman, I have two requests. I think let's start with the Capitol Police. Item 4-1H, you have that in front of you already, I'm sure.
It's on page 9 of the packets in front of you.
Mr. Chairman, these are much needed upgrades to the Capitol complex in the area of security. The Capitol.
Sorry, sir.
That's all right. Capitol Police is trying to, of course, in the Capitol Square complex, we are open to the public, and that represents a unique challenge for Capitol Police to be able to provide security not only for us, but for the public that visits there. They're planning on doing some installation of mobile and vehicle barriers, an upgrade to their camera system, some blast-resistant trash cans all around, and I think they're also requesting some, if I could get it right here, making some personnel positions permanent that are currently part-time, such as a public information officer. I'm happy to answer any questions. I have a whole packet here that I can delve into, but if anybody from the Capitol Police is here that would like to speak to it, I'm happy to let them do that. They may be trusting me to carry the water this morning, but anyway, I'll answer what I can, Mr. Chairman. The second request that we have is from DLAS. They very much need to replace our antiquated legislative information system. It's built on a platform, I think it's platforms built on platforms that go back to an antiquated software that they're having trouble finding people to write code for and so forth, and so the whole thing just needs to be revamped. They're asking for some money in the second year of the biennium to initiate that process, and then some more substantial money going forward to be able to completely change that system, make it more usable, easier to maintain, impervious to hacking, that sort of thing. And obviously that process is going to take 2 or 3 years and be a little bit expensive, but they've laid out what they need there. And I don't know if anybody from DLAS is here to speak to their need either, but if not, I'll do what I can to answer those questions.
Anyone need to speak to the amendment?
That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, sir.
Okay, now that we have a quorum, we're gonna, with the one bill that's on the docket,
Chairman, House Bill 766 is Delegate Jones's, it's the 9C bond bill. This is a typical bill. Each year there are revenue producing projects that have to be authorized, and this has to be authorized through a standalone bill because 9C debt, as you recall from the treasurer last week, that's full faith and credit, but the revenues from the project pay the debt service, so there's no impact on debt capacity and there's no impact on the general fund. There are two projects in the bill. One is a dorm project at Norfolk State, $10 million. The other is a dorm project at William & Mary for $11 million. And that's typically what you'll find here are dorm projects and food service projects. That's basically it, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Entertain the motion.
Second.
Move the second that we report. Everybody cast your vote, please. Okay. 4-6-0. Thank you. We'll go back to our amendments, and we have Delegate Rush.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I have several. If you don't mind, I'll start with the Virginia Seafood and Agricultural Research Extension Center in Hampton, Virginia. This facility is currently owned by the Virginia Tech Foundation, and it's $2.5 million of general fund money in the first year of HB 30. And this facility is in desperate need of improvement, and it supports the seafood handling and safety research for the entire industry in seafood industry in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We've got some fine folks from Hampton here if there were any questions. Then Mr. Chairman, next would be Radford University. This is non-general fund money. It's allows them to start the planning and capital outlay for the capital outlay of let me see, it's the renovated construction for the Center of Adaptive Innovation and Creativity. And what they're going to do is build synergies on the arts between arts and healthcare. As you may have seen in the paper, Radford University is is merging with, or not merging, they're taking over the Jefferson College of Healthcare in Roanoke. This will be a synergy of that, help autistic and physical therapy and speech therapy with some other things. And that's non-general fund money. And the next one, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, is a $1.8 million non-general fund, allows the for an aquatic center at VMI. I talked to the general yesterday. He's a 4-star general, former commander of SITCOM, really big deal. And he assured me that this project will be used continuously. From his words, 0600 to 1600 will be cadets, and from 1600 on will be NCAA teams. They've got a women's water polo team, and both men's and women's swimming. And he said this facility is greatly needed and will be utilized a lot. So, and if you've ever been, Mr. Chairman, you've been to VMI, others in the committee have, they work really hard. So I believe him when he says they will be using this constantly. And one other one, Mr. Chairman, was, I'm not sure if it's capital outlay, but was it for the small counties with comp board? Is that coming before this? Okay, so this was brought to me by Delegate Habib, and some of you guys may have this in your districts. These small counties will get, the comp board may fund a half a position or a 3/4 position, and which really allows no room for time off, vacation, and some of those things. So what I would like to do is to see about pulling some, getting some folks to, that could rotate around, get trained up in these areas. Some of it's registrar, some of it's in your treasurer's offices or your clerk's office or your commissioner of revenue. and that way they could go and fill in while keep the offices open. He mentioned Craig County, which is a very small county, and there's a lot of offices closed in the summer. All righty, thank you, members of the committee.
Before we proceed, let me just share with you guys, in my day job, I do a lot of speaking, and this past Sunday, I think I overdid it, so I'm trying to get my voice back, so just bear with me, okay? Thank you very much. Okay. Delegate King. Delegate Lethwich. Delegate O'Quinn. Delegate Ware.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Where would you like me to be to present? Right here?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, the budget amendments that I have for you come from the State Corporation Commission, and they are restorative in both cases. Fairly simple. They would restore, in one instance, the public service company fees and taxes and federal trust appropriations, thereby restoring the State Corporation Commission's authority to manage fund transfers and to expend funds as needed to fulfill its constitutional and statutory requirements. The second one restores public service company fees and taxes. Other than that, Mr. Chairman, they're fairly self-explanatory. These are fees that were given to the State Corporation Commission in pursuance of their stated purpose and what we ask of them to do. I do think I've got somebody here from the SEC who can further illuminate that if you would prefer. That's all I have.
So, yeah, great, thank you.
I'm finished unless you have any questions.
Any questions?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Delegate Watts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With all due respect, the reason I'm here is on HB 1057. As it turned out, there was no fiscal impact statement, and so there should be no impact on the state budget. But the timing of having to submit our budget request leads to that. I was also hoping to catch another member. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Delegate Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just loud enough. Can you hear? Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, item 81, number 3H, would provide $100,000 in each year of the biennium so that the Department of Human Resource Management can conduct an annual survey of state employees to determine employee satisfaction in areas related to their role, their compensation, their benefits, their personal and professional development, and the workplace environment, among other items. The results of the survey would be reported to the Governor and the General Assembly. As a member of the Employee Retirement Security and Pension Reform Commission, we've heard testimony from various stakeholder groups regarding the importance of ensuring that state employees are comfortable and satisfied with their working conditions. The results of the annual survey and any changes that may come from the results would also be important as the state continues to look at ways to attract employees, particularly as many mid and upper level managers begin to retire from state government. Hope the committee will look favorably upon the importance of conducting the survey and giving PHRM some guidance as they move forward. And this was brought up again by the state. Then I have 3 amendments concerning BCU, HB 30, item C44, number 3H. I'll go one by one. Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, this amendment is a language amendment to allow Virginia Commonwealth University to proceed with the planning for a STEM building and the expansion of the Humanities and Science building as a single facility in effort to save project costs. Mr. Rich Sawalski, the Director of VCU's Facility Management Division, is here to speak to the amendment and answer any questions. Would you like for him to speak to all three of the amendments or one at a time? I think everybody knows him. Why don't you come in? And then, if I may go ahead and speak to the next one. Is this better?
I don't want to stay on, Matt.
There we go.
And better?
Now, amendment, item C 13.50, number 1H, would provide $6 million in fiscal year 19 to provide for the replacement of the roof and rooftop HVAC equipment in the Life Sciences building at Virginia Commonwealth University. Again, Mr. Sawalski will speak to that. And then in HB 29, item C19, number 1H, requests additional non-general fund revenue bond authority for the School of Engineering research expansion in the amount of $1.18 million. Again, Mr. Sawalski is here to speak to these three amendments and answer any questions you may have.
Mr. Chairman, the first is a simple language amendment. We have the authorization for a STEM building. It was in two parts. We'd rather plan it in one because we believe there are efficiencies that can be gained by combining them at this time. We're authorized for planning, so we'd like to go forward with planning the phase 1 and phase 2 for it. The second amendment is for the Life Sciences building. The roof is in very bad shape. Typically, we would have handled this through maintenance reserve, but the $2 million cap, we're seeking $6 million in order to do it all at one time. Then the final one is, again, just a language amendment. We have our funding letter from the Bureau of Capital Outlay Management for our engineering research building, and it requires that VCU contribute another $1.1 million. It gives us the authorization for that.
Thank you.
Dudley, Cole.
So we got issues. Do the best you can.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I have, I believe, 3 amendments before the sub. The first one is 71H, which is just a language amendment. A few years ago, language was placed in the budget to limit the amount of fee treasurers could charge to collect delinquent tax, or not delinquent taxes, but delinquent court fines. I have two problems with this. One is I think it's a bit of crony capitalism in that while it limits treasurers, it doesn't limit if they contract out. And there are localities that are exempted from it listed in the budget. So it's kind of unfair. You either need to do it for all or nobody. And so it puts treasurers at a disadvantage if they want to do it in-house. Kind of forces them to contract it out. And two, whenever this is legislating in the budget because it contradicts provisions existing in the code. And normally we don't like to legislate in the budget. However, I think there are cases where you got to do it if something is emergent and needs to be done quickly and you haven't submitted legislation for it, but it should be temporary. Then the next year you should go ahead and take that language out of the budget and submit a bill to correct the code. And that has not happened yet with this language, so the 71H would strike that language. I think it's the right thing to do for the two reasons I've given you. I have two other amendments, 83-5H, which provides $50,000 for the Department of Elections to implement House Bill 1325 dealing with split precincts. I don't expect that will be needed. I have not received a fizz on that legislation yet. I put it in there just in case. But just in case if they need it, they say they need it, it's there. And then the same situation with 83-6H dealing with House Bill 122, which I believe may have a fiscal impact. Last year it did, and that led to the demise of the legislation. And the legislation, I think, is important in that it prohibits personal use of campaign finance funds. So I hope that when we get the fizz, that if it does have a impact on the Department of Elections, that you'll be able to find the resources to fund that. So thank you.
Thank you. Delegate O'Quinn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The budget amendment that I have, item 476, number 2H, seeks to reimburse a portion of the costs that were incurred by the localities with the state board and General Assembly decision to decertify the electronic voting machines. I know in some areas those were used up and freezing up, and in other localities, such as some of the localities that I represent, they were still in fine shape. I understand the policy decision, why we got there, but there's no doubt that it was a lot of expense incurred by localities, many of whom would just as soon to have kept the machines they had. And I know why we told them that, but it's still expensive for a locality to absorb. All right, thank you.
Delegate Bell.
Chairman, good morning. So this is House Bill 483. You had helped us, I think, last year with a bill involving restitution that came out of the Crime Commission. Restitution is not fines and costs. It doesn't go to the court. It's money that's supposed to go to the crime victim to pay for damages. And we found a $230 million figure, which is big even up here, but I can assure you in the rest of this building it's just a shocking figure that had not been paid. Part of the study discovered, and then all the credit goes to a very enterprising TV reporter that found a little piece of that which is arguably easier to fix, which is money has been collected, so the defendant is paid, done what he was supposed to do, but it's just landed into various accounts around the Commonwealth and has not reached the victim. We're not saying anybody's embezzling or stealing it, it just never gets delivered. By the time the money arrives in the clerk's office, the person supposed to send it to is moved, and it just sits there. And they're ultimately supposed to send it to the victim fund. Some of them do, some of them haven't. The bill would say they've got to always send it to the victim fund, but then we called the victim fund and said, well, what are you going to do with it? And just today we discovered that they have $3.5 million sitting there, collected, undelivered. It's got somebody's name on it with a little number by it, but it never gets to the right person. The TV reporter found a couple people just using Google and Facebook. So the reason this bill is before you is we've talked to the victim fund, and they said we're busy. Every person on this staff has something they're already doing. We would like to have one person whose job each day as he wakes up and says, we got $4,300 for Luke Torian for his busted nose. It's sitting in our account. How do we find him? And just uses the tools available in the modern age to find those people. That's the bill. It required, the reason it's here is it would cost one FTE, somebody over at the victim fund to set up whose job every day was to wake up and try to find the money and see the money that's there and get the money to the victims. That's the bill, sir. Thank you. I'm sorry, I don't know if you have any questions. Yeah. Not my first rodeo. Thank you.
Delegate Martin.
Chairman, committee, thank you for having me. I have two bills to present to you today. HB 449, I'm going to start with that, which is same-day voter registration. It's a bill that repeals the deadline for registering to vote in advance of an election and allows eligible voters to register at any time, including the day of election. Localities give varying budgets of how much this would cost, from 0 to 110,000. We have a budget amendment that approximated around $50,000. So it's a matter of administrating, the Department of Elections administrating this change, and localities, training poll workers and shifting how they normally do their elections. Okay. And then the second one is HB 981, which is an optional plastic bag tax. This allows a locality to impose a 5-cent tax on disposable plastic bags or paper bags in grocery stores and convenience. This costs some money at implementation, around $120,000. But we did find when it was implemented, the costs go down, and when it's implemented, the localities can actually, recoup quite a bit of money through this plan. All right. Any questions? Thank you.
One more time.
Delegate Levine.
Doesn't seem to work.
There we go.
Oh, it does work. What do you know? Hey, microphone. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My amendment is item 1, number 2H, a companion to my bill HB 701. I would provide the funding for the clerk of the House to stream and archive subcommittee meetings. We come a long way already this year. Letters signed, circulated by the Virginia Transparency Caucus and signed by 60% of members of the House and the Senate, majority in both chambers, requested that the clerk of the House and the Senate record committees and subcommittee votes and hearings. This year, as we know, we now record subcommittees as well as committee votes, and we now archive and stream committees. This amendment allows us to archive and stream subcommittees. A lot of money's actually already been spent on this. $511,000 has already been spent to do what we're doing now. This requires an additional $166,000. The figures I was given by the House Information Technology 95 and 59 actually did not include the cost of closed captioning, so it actually is $166,300 in the first year and $121,000 the second year. But when you consider that we're already 3/4 of the way there, we've already spent $511,000. This is just $166,000 more. It's a third of that amount more, and then we can be complete. And starting next year, we can do what the majority of the House and Senate have asked us to do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Oh, my, I'm gonna stay on.
Delegate Wilt.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, House Bill 30, the amendment would ask that the $25 that the clerks of the court remit for passport processing, currently they remit that, but they send 2/3 of that back to the state just as general fees. I'm asking that that full $25 would stay with the clerks of court. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members.
Delegate Air.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I have two budget amendments. The first will be budget amendment item C6.101H for George Mason University. Chairman and members of the committee, budget amendment item C6 is a request for additional general funds to support improvement of the telecommunications network infrastructure. The 2017 General Assembly authorized planning funds for phase 1 of the improvement of the telecommunications network infrastructure. And George Mason is at a crossroads as it relates to technology. The need to replace the aging IT infrastructure is critical. Mason also needs to expand its bandwidth available to accommodate the increase of more than 5,000 students in recent years, nearly all of whom possess more than one wireless communication device. Inaction at this time will leave the university's information network at risk failure and will leave Mason unable to meet its academic mission. Thank you. My next budget amendment is C23.50-1H. This is for the replacement of Central State Hospital. Mr. Chairman, this amendment would provide $50 million from bond proceeds in the first year to begin design and programming for phase 1 of a new Central State Hospital. We're requesting this $50 million to begin the first phase because the projected cost for the full project is around $240 million. And Mr. Chairman, if you will, in last May of this spring, I had the great opportunity of visiting Central State Hospital and hosting a town hall with the employees on the ground. And I must admit that I was very much taken back by the visit, visually and from what I heard from the employees. What was painstakingly evident was the conditions that the staff, many of whom are my constituents, are being required to operate in, the antiquated resources that are available, and the hazardous conditions throughout the campus. Central State is our only maximum security forensic unit in the entire Commonwealth, yet we have rebuilt other state hospitals several times, but allowed Central State to fall into disrepair. And Mr. Chairman, while I know we are trying to be rapid pace and as quick as possible, I have a gentleman who has traveled a great deal to give us an additional perspective of the history, very briefly, of why this is an urgent request. Dr. King.
I have copies of my remarks, and I'll be very, very brief. I'm a former commissioner of the Virginia Department of Behavioral Health. I came to the Commonwealth in 1971. I was director of the Department of Mental Health during the Wilder administration, and I've held other occupational positions throughout my time here. I'm currently a professor at the University of Texas at Austin. I had nothing to do with taking your basketball coach away. Very, very quickly. For the last 10 years, faculty at the university have studied the history of Central State Lunatic Asylum for the Colored Insane. Central State was the first mental institution in the world, developed, established by the Commonwealth of Virginia to provide services to newly freed slaves. Over the last 10 years, we have digitized every piece of paper that the hospital has kept prodigiously more than any other facility in the United States. We have documented and digitized over 800,000 pages of materials. We've received funding from the Andrew Mellon Foundation of $800,000, $75,000 from the United States government, $50,000 from the president of the University of Texas at Austin, and $0 from the Commonwealth of Virginia, either foundations or from government. In 2 weeks, I'll be returning to New York to ask the Mellon Foundation for $5 million additional dollars to complete our project at Central State Hospital. It would be a lot easier for me in my efforts to fund this project at Central State Hospital to be able to say to the Mellon Foundation and others that I have the extraordinary support of the legislature, the governor, and members of other organizations in the Commonwealth of Virginia to be able to complete this project at this most extraordinary hospital. Thank you. Thank you very much, and I do have copies.
Mr. Chairman, in closing, I'd just like to say that I understand there are numerous budget priorities that must be taken under consideration, and I understand that we must consider the right solution before taking action on Central State Hospital. But the hospital has been overlooked long enough. There is a tremendous opportunity to significantly improve the safety and the patients and employees while right-sizing the campus and providing efficiencies to the hospital and the Commonwealth. Thank you.
Delegate Colonel Ford.
Good morning. I'm here for, excuse me, item C27.10-2H, House Bill 30. Whitewater State Park is under construction in Stafford County, occupying about 1,100 acres along the Potomac River, and the park is currently scheduled to open in late spring 2018. Whitewater State Park is in desperate need of funds to support construction of basic amenities, including restrooms, picnic shelters, playgrounds, trails, and parking, river access points for fishing, boating, and swimming, and a main truck line rail. This region of the state has outside demand for recreational and green space and currently cannot meet the needs of its residents. At nearby Leesavania State Park, located about 15 miles north along the Potomac in Prince William County, the Department of Conservation and Recreation frequently needs to close the park during peak season because the park reaches its carrying capacity of visitors so quickly. The demand for recreational space is so high in Stafford, Prince William area that many residents who live near Leesavania State Park rent out their lawns as parking spaces so park visitors can walk 1 to 2 miles to the park entrance. The need for the state park, the need for a state park with full amenities is incredibly high, and it is critical to support the full $7 million request in this budget amendment to support construction for Phase 2 of the park. Due to the state's procurement and bidding process, as well as design and engineering costs, and the need to mobilize construction for numerous landmarks in Phase 2, allocating the full budget request to this project will allow Virginia State Parks to proceed quickly and efficiently to satisfy this need and deliver an exceptional state park to Virginians who greatly need this recreational space. Our 37 state parks celebrate the natural beauty of our Commonwealth, provide easily accessible recreational green space for Virginia residents, and preserve areas for plant and wildlife. This budget request will support a critical strategic goal for the Virginia State Parks and deliver immense impact to the residents of Stafford County and the Commonwealth of Virginia. Thank you.
Delegate Lopez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have two budget amendments here today. As Delegate Landis will appreciate, totaling a grand total of $53,200. But both do a lot of good, I think. First is 83-4H, pre-registration of 16 and 17-year-olds. Pre-registration allows Americans who are not old enough to vote to complete a registration form so that they will be automatically added to the voter rolls when they do reach voting age. Currently, we have around 12 states that do this, including states like Louisiana, Rhode Island, Utah, Florida. This is important because we're bringing the young people into the voting system even before they reach voting age has significant benefits. Pre-registration makes it easier for folks to vote. It increases democratic participation by a factor of around 5%, as we've seen in just recent years in several states. And the budget amendment is only $33,200 to do this good. It provides the necessary funding to update the VERIS system, the VERIS system, in order to implement pre-registration for 16-year-olds. It also includes additional funding to update and print new forms, training, and guidance documents. So it's basically $25,000 to update VERIS, $2,200 to revise the voter registration application and update the training and guidance documents, and just $6,000 to print and distribute applications. So basically what you're doing here is for a very little amount of money, you're doing a lot of good at improving democracy, improving overall democratic participation, and making it easier for 16 and 17-year-olds to already be in the rolls when they do reach the age of 18. So I hope it's the will of the committee to approve that and support that going forward. The second one is the Virginia Commission on Energy and the Environment. It's number 6-2H. Basically, what the purpose of the original Virginia Commission on Energy and Environment was to review and recommend steps to implement the Virginia Energy Plan. And so with the renewal of the Virginia Energy Plan coming up this year in October, numerous clean energy bills filed during the 2018 session and increased urgency in addressing climate change. I think it's important that we have this commission up and running so that we can work to review these issues throughout the year and make recommendations to the General Assembly. So what does that mean? Why is this important? One, better legislation. Energy policy is a complicated issue with large and diverse groups of stakeholders. Having a commission that can thoroughly review legislative proposals and take input from stakeholders of all backgrounds would help improve energy-related policy in the Commonwealth. Transparency. The commission would hold public meetings, take public comment, and provide materials for review. Virginia's energy policy has a major impact on all Virginians. With such high stakes, and so many Virginians interested in Virginia's energy future, the commission would be a great place for citizens to engage in the legislative process. The public process also allows all sides equal access to review proposals and recommendations before session starts, rather than a closed door or rush process when bills are filed 2 weeks after the beginning of the legislative session. And time. Numerous bills related to energy policy were filed this session. All of these bills are typically referred to the Energy Subcommittee of Commerce and Labor, which meets once per year. The Commission would ensure that these proposals receive a more thorough review and assist the Energy Subcommittee in evaluating these proposals before the legislative session has begun. And then cost. I've requested $20,000 to cover the basic operating costs of the Commission. Given the major impact the Commission could have on Virginia energy policy, $20,000 is a pretty small price to pay. So I hope it's the will of the committee to view these two proposals favorably, one for energy policy issues and one to make it easier to improve democratic participation in the Commonwealth. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That was Atlantis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, it's good to appear before you. Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, I have several budget amendments for your subcommittee's consideration. The first one is number 11H. Most of you know that our clerk's offices have resources related to interpreters for our public meetings here in Richmond. The problem is those of us that have constituents who are deaf to provide interpreters, it is our responsibility to provide that out of our office expense money. Well, an interpreter can cost anywhere from $100 to $300 depending on the length of time that you may need. Since our office expense monies are very limited, what I thought would be good is to at least put forward an amendment for our clerks, both House and Senate, to have some resources so that if there were requests from a member, they could basically apply to the clerk's office for reimbursement or for authorization for an expenditure of an interpreter in the district, whether it's a town meeting or an individual meeting or a group meeting. It seemed to me that would promote transparency and better utilization from the standpoint of funds and affordability for our members, both the House and Senate. So that's number 11H. Mr. Chairman, the next one is related to the General Assembly, and actually Senator Howell has a similar budget amendment on the Senate side. This would be for Virginia Commonwealth University's L. Douglas Waters School of Public Affairs to provide us with some additional information related to public policy polling, which some of you may know the Commonwealth poll that's done on an annual basis is now being twice a year. We've never really helped pay for that, even though VCU does that and we get that information. That information has been very helpful to the House Education Committee, but they are also delving into other issues other than education, and that information is provided to us, and they actually allow us input into what questions should be in the Commonwealth poll each year. So part of that money would be used for that. It would also be used, and they're willing to do more legislative analysis for us as well, and technical assistance. And the last thing that would be used for part of those funds, Mr. Chairman, would be for training for our legislative assistants. As many of you know, we do orientations for our legislative assistants each year, provided from the clerk's standpoint. But what they're envisioning and working with both the clerk in the House and the Senate is to go out and do regional training in the interim for our legislative assistants related to issues and other things that the clerk's offices may identify that would help with professional development for our legislative assistants. So that's the package of what the $300,000 would be used for. And Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to go over all my amendments, but the last one is a very modest amendment. Item C, number 45-1H. It's only $25 million for each year of the biennium. And actually, after the request came to me from Mr. Bryan and the folks that support this effort, I actually got them down $25 million each year to $25 million from $50 million that their original request was. But it is an important issue. One of the things that you all know is our localities are facing many, many challenges related to stormwater and stormwater runoff. What this would do is provide funding through our bond proceeds for stormwater assistance to help allow our localities come into compliance with the requirements, and more importantly, to make sure we're being good stewards of our natural resource with water. So with that, if Mr. Bryant can come up and speak briefly, Mr. Chairman, those are the only three I want to highlight. I have a few others, but I'll talk to you all individually about those.
Thank you, Delegate Landis. Yes, $25 million may require just a little bit of extra explanation. I'm speaking on behalf of Virginia Forever, which is an environmental industry coalition. Also speaking for Virginia Municipal League, Virginia Association of Counties, and the Virginia Municipal Stormwater Association. Virginia is in an agreement with EPA to reduce stormwater pollution as well as wastewater and agricultural runoff. This agreement stems from some years ago between litigation with EPA. Out of that litigation came an agreement with the state. So Virginia is party to this agreement. We're contractually obligated to make certain reductions of agricultural wastewater and stormwater. Stormwater is the one area where we are not making substantial progress. EPA is watching Virginia, but also is working very closely with Virginia on this. The General Assembly created in 2013 the Stormwater Local Assistance Fund. It is a dollar for dollar, 50-50 partnership with localities. It has been reasonably calculated that the state's share of that partnership is $50 million a year. Since 2013, the General Assembly has invested almost every year in that partnership, and your investment has been somewhere between 20 and 35 million, give or take. So we would be asking this year that the legislature continue with its usual practice of making a substantial investment in the Stormwater Local Assistance Fund. DEQ administers it. It's always oversubscribed. They have many more qualified applications than they have money to spend. So we would ask that you continue with your general practice. Thank you, Delegate Landis.
Mr. Chairman, let me just say I have spoken to Chairman Jones about this, and I know this is a big ask, and this is one of those things that, depending on where we are kind of at the end of the day, if we have resources to put into one-time expenditures, at least for this biennium, this may be one of those things that we at least could consider. Thank you.
Delegate Brewer.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I bring before you item 273, 1H. This budget amendment yet does not have a fisc, but this actually is directly related to the commissioners of revenue in each locality. Tax requires them, as part of the scope of their duties daily, to request ruling on taxation in regards to BPOL. What they're asking is to waive the $275 fee that has become burdensome on the localities. I believe there might be someone from Commissioners of Revenue to speak on that, or not. But the Commissioners of Revenue Association is supporting that. We do not have an impact back on that as of yet.
Delegate Boulevard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is item C45-2H, and actually it builds upon the comments and budget language that Delegate Landis just described with regard to the Stormwater Local Assistance Fund. Mine is the same amount. It's just front-loaded in the first year with $50 million. I don't know that I could say too much more than what Delegate Landis pointed out. I think he very eloquently stated what the need is, and the simple fact is that we are under the gun to meet Chesapeake Bay water cleanup requirements by 2025. Urban stormwater is a huge part of that, and this funding is critical to making sure that we do that. I also want to make sure folks realize this is not just a Chesapeake Bay issue. That money also goes to areas outside of the Chesapeake watershed. While the Chesapeake Bay has a mandate, a lot of local watersheds also have a mandate, and so this is critical to making sure that those localities can meet those. The beauty of SLAF is that it's a 50-50 cost share. And so every investment that the state is making, you're getting the exact same investment back from the localities.
Delegate Landis mentioned the fact that Virginia Forever had looked at the needs, and so $50 million isn't taken out of anywhere. It's actually really based on an assessment. But another piece of information that I think is useful is that the Virginia Association of Stormwater Management Agencies did a survey of their members and actually found that just in this upcoming 2-year period, there are about $152 million worth of projects that are out there that are ready to go. And so that equates to 74 million or 76 million just over the next 2 years. And as he said, there are real consequences for not making these. This is a critical investment that we make. Really appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Delegate Plum.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you very much. I have item C21.51H. It relates to the Science Museum of Virginia. I do not have to spend time talking to you about the significance and importance of the Science Museum of Virginia, but you may wonder why I'm here as a Northern Virginia talking about it. And that's because we've had amazing success with the museum here in Richmond, also in Danville, as you know, start up there. And what we're looking for now is some planning money to build on what's been going forward as largely a citizen effort in Northern Virginia to have a science center. Nini Spivey, director of the center in Northern Virginia, is here, and I want to give her a couple minutes to have a say, but I want to say to you that what this does is it builds on the importance of science and technology that we've all heard a lot about. It builds on the interest of young children in getting involved in science and technology, and it builds on the success that's already been realized by the citizen effort. There is a science center now at Fair Oaks Mall. It's a storefront museum. Land has been granted to, given to the Science Museum of Northern Virginia to build a freestanding museum right on the border with Loudoun County. So it's well situated to be a service to our region. It would do the kind of things that you expect to see at a science museum. It's a hand-on set of experiences. A lot of citizen effort have gone into this. Science Museum of Virginia is willing to work with us, and I hope you all will be willing to give us some pre-planning money. If I can give Mrs. Spivey a moment to say a little bit about what the museum does. Okay.
Thank you, Delegate Plum. Thank you, committee, for this time. I'm Nini Spivey. I'm the Executive Director for the Children's Science Center. We're based in Northern Virginia. Today we serve 70,000 visitors in only 5,000 square feet. We also do that by going out on the road. We go to 5 jurisdictions across Northern Virginia, bringing the Science Center to the schools, as well as inviting schools to our Science Center. We are very fortunate to be developing a partnership for several years now with the Science Museum of Virginia. They've been great advisors and supporters, and we see a great opportunity in bringing a regional science center to Northern Virginia. Until we opened our small 5,000 square foot facility we call the lab at Fair Oaks, we were in Northern Virginia, the largest metro area in the United States without a children's museum or a science center. So you can imagine the demand that we've had has been pretty significant up there. We run about 2.5 times the industry capacity through that small facility. We have a lottery process and a wait list for the schools that we serve across the region. We have families waiting in line on peak days to get into the space. There's great hunger in our area for hands-on, experiential, STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics learning. And the demand is more than we can fulfill in the facility we have. So we are also very fortunate to be the beneficiary of a donation of land from the Concora developers in Dulles, Virginia. This gives us an opportunity to build really a world-class regional science center in Northern Virginia. It's on Route 28, it's great accessibility to many counties, and it, of course, being on the border of Loudoun and Fairfax. It is also an economically strong opportunity for the area and bringing visitors from all over. In fact, even in our small facility, we've seen visitors from 46 states to our facility, so we know there's a lot of demand even by visitors in the area to visit us. The economic impact was estimated by Dr. Fuller at George Mason University for the Loudoun County area as well as for Northern Virginia and for the Commonwealth. For Loudoun County specifically, the short-term impact is $84 million. The annual regular impact for this is a $13 million annual impact, and that's made up in a great part by spending that occurs. When you have such a great cultural resource, it attracts a lot of people that want to do more than just visit our museum. The facility is also situated in a mixed-use development, and we have access to 150 acres of natural parkland, so we can be a science center inside and out and have a great degree of environmental education. So I think I've covered enough, but thank you all so much for your time this morning. Thank you for considering this opportunity in Northern Virginia. Actually, I'm going to add one thing, which is important, is that our kids in Northern Virginia, we serve many of those that need us most today. 30% of our child population qualifies for free and reduced lunch. It's our organization's great priority to reach all of our Title I schools in Northern Virginia. We go to them, they come to us, and we can do a lot more of that with the larger Science Center and with the partnership with the Science Museum of Virginia. Thank you.
Delegate Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a budget request for $400,000 in order to replace the barracks for Area 13, Virginia State Police. These barracks have become antiquated, they're too small, they're having to share space with other areas and within the district. This came from my district commander for the Virginia State Police. Area 13 barracks, we are at the beginning of the Interstate 81 corridor. When these barracks were built in the early 90s, the traffic on Interstate 81 has nearly quadrupled, and staff has also grown to that as well. So no improvements have been made to that facility. So the Virginia State Police have asked me to put this in. $400,000, just so everyone knows, is the amount of money that was given to Harrisonburg for them to replace their barracks, and Harrisonburg is of similar size and nature. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so this, I was here for Budget Amendment 81, number 2H, and to support House Bill 1462. My understanding from the Department of Planning and Budget is that there's going to be no fiscal impact, so there's no further need for the budget amendment. So thank you very much.
Delegate Klein. Delegate Goodidist.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This is in reference to the final report of the Commission on Integrity and Public Confidence in State Government. So this would help the Virginia Conflict of Interest and Ethics Advisory Council speak to the accountability principle. It would hire one employee, one full-time employee, $72,000 every year to randomly audit one member of the State Senate every year, one member of the House of Delegates, 1% of state employees who have to file disclosures, and 1% of lobbyists who have to file disclosures. Other states do these random audits. It's in the interest of disclosure and transparency, and it's a recommendation that came out of the commission. So, thank you.
Delegate Morales.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My budget amendment is item 83, number 8H. In 2017, this body passed unanimously a constitutional amendment providing real property tax exemption for surviving spouses of permanently disabled veterans. And it passed 95-0 in the House, 39-0 in the Senate. There's companion bills obviously introduced it again this year, given that we had an election. And this item is for $100,000 for advertising that's required the Sunday before the election, informing the voters of what's going to be on the ballot. And then the next item is HB 247. That is to make up for a lost revenue. It's a cap on what the state can collect and default on student loans. Right now the collection rate's at 30%, so they cannot
collect more than 15% on student debt. And apparently that will affect their ability to engage outside counsel to collect on that amount. And this would be line item 143.8H. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I just want to present one of my 3 budget amendments dealing with the new jail in Henry County. It's all worn out, and we've got to have a new jail. What this budget amendment does is ask for the state 25% share. This is item 279, number 1H. I'll just point out to the committee myself that the unique aspect of this is that is the mental health wing, sort of a new pilot concept in our new jails. Sheriff Blaine Perry from Henry County is here, and I would like him to address the committee very briefly on the need and where we're going. Very briefly.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, thank you for your service and for your time. Myself, and I would like to point out Tim Hall, our county administrator, came. As Delegate Poindexter has alluded to, we have a facility that was opened in 1974 that was originally designed for 67. In the mid-90s, we double bunked it to 120. We're regularly having 55 to 60 sleep on the floor. Yesterday's count was 185 in the facility, and we had 94 housed out, which is actually a low number. Because we're operating at 2 and 3 times the capacity, we're regularly having plumbing failures. We're nearing inhumane conditions for space and the old outdated facility. To give you a quick idea, if that table was divided in half and put side by side, it wouldn't fit in the room that serves as a laundry room and also a place where we work with the GED program for inmates. Our attorney-client visitation takes place in a small closet that has to be shared with mental health, working through Piedmont Community Services. As Delegate Poindexter alluded to, our new facility would have approximately 48 beds dedicated for mental health. In May of 2017, I personally attended the meeting where the Board of Corrections approved our plans for a 400-bed facility and recommended to planning and budgeting that up to $18.8 million be included for what would be about a $75 million project. When the budget was handed down, this money was not included in the budget. Very quickly finishing up, our locality has already raised taxes trying to proceed with this project. The first time in 30 years we raised taxes to go along with what would be needed for this project. We acquired land, we've turned the engineers and architects loose, we've got nearing $4 million tied up already of our own money. If we tried to reduce the size of the facility by what we're not able to get through the state, our facility would be full the first day. We thank you very much for your considerations in this, and we hope that you will be able to find a way to allow the state to put the 25% reimbursement back in.
Thank you for coming down, sir.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And if at all possible, I have some one-page flyers. Thank you.
Delegate Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee and subcommittee. As you all know, there's a lot of issues, and we're trying to resolve the issues with our training centers. It's still a bit of a moving part. A lot of the folks that are still residing in the remaining training centers have a great deal of medical fragility. So there is conversations and discussions with the closure of Southwest versus Central Virginia Training Center and what that should look like. This budget amendment doesn't address those issues. That's sort of, if you will, a tangential and a critically interrelated, Michael and Tony, subject. But what the budget amendment for your subcommittee, Mr. Chairman and members, is to address state property that's been identified as being challenged already on the 350 acres or so. Last year, we funded, the General Assembly funded through appropriations about $180,000 to do a phase 1 assessment of our property. In that 1,200-page study, they identified 4 acres of this property was previously a landfill. There are underground pesticide and diesel and gasoline tanks, all of which environmental challenges have to be mitigated. So my budget ask is for $570,000 to remediate the known contaminants that are on this property. This property is waterfront property that goes straight into the James River in Amherst County. And then additional $250,000, Tony, to do the phase 2 studies to actually look at the rest of the mitigation that's going to be needed to address the state owns all of that property, and we've got sort of our order of duty. So 2 different issues that don't get wrapped around whether yes or no closure or not. At some point in time, the state's going to have to deal with the known contaminants on the property, and that's really what it is to address, Mr. Chairman. Questions? Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Tony, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have for you item C20.10, number 3H, which is a request for $6.122 million for the funding for equipment for the Virginia Technical and Research Institute Biosciences addition. The addition is already funded and is underway and is being built, but we've got to have equipment to put in it so that it can be actually used. And so that's the nature of the equipment and the nature of the request. So appreciate the consideration.
To ensure that I have not missed anyone, Delegate Mullins, Delegate Peace, Delegate LaRock,
he's on his way. He's right.
Delegate Sickles, and Delegate Hurst. I think what we'll do is we'll carry these over to next week and try to get to them next week. And that's all we have for the committee. It's your eyes.
The bill never got done. So now I have like 3 hours to do that. Stay in your case. Yes. Yes, one.
Fantastic. Good way to do it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next week.